So the younger version of Saumya was very different from the Saumya you see today. She was a shy child who had basically shut herself down because from a very early age she had seen abuse and bullying, and the world did not feel like a safe space. Yet there was a part of her through all of that hopelessness that did not lose hope. That felt, okay, there's something that's going to keep me going. I don't know what that is, but I knew that there's something that I'm here for.
Welcome to yet another episode of the Smashed, Bashed, Yet Not Dashed podcast. I have today with me a very, very special guest and someone who, well, it will be different compared to what we've normally done on this particular podcast. And you have to tune in for that. Because today we have Saumya, and Saumya is someone who brings a different dimension to what we've normally had here. Someone who in the space of emotional well-being and mental wellness has come out and done amazing things, and a conversation that in today's time is more relevant than ever before. So stay tuned for this one.
Have you ever been knocked down and found it hard to get up? Have you ever been knocked down and bounced back to come back even stronger? Hi, I'm Gaurav and you can call me GB, and welcome to the Smashed, Bashed, Yet Not Dashed podcast. A fortnightly podcast where I speak about persistence, perseverance, and overcoming the odds to come out ahead.
So Saumya, first of all, welcome to the Gaurav Bhagat Academy. It's great to have you on the Smashed, Bashed, Yet Not Dashed podcast. Been hearing such amazing things about what you've been doing. Okay, we're talking about the BWBusinessWorld, 40 under 40, amazing things happening with, a lot of clients. You've been able to bring about, transformation, healing, and more. So first up, how have things been with you?
So you're right, Gaurav. I think this is the best time to be in this space. And I'm so grateful that people are finally bringing a focus into emotional mental well-being. I feel we're a little late to the game, but better late than never. Yeah. It's now become an urgency that people have started to recognize. And I'm grateful for the fact that they feel safe enough to now ask for help.
Yeah, so true. And we're going to talk about that and a lot more. But before we go to where we currently are, let's go back to the Saumya of perhaps like the teens or the pre-teens. Sure. Saumya. So what was it really like? What was it like for you growing up? When did some of that happen? I know you went to school to Siddharth Patel.
I did.
But let's talk about the younger version of Saumya.
So the younger version of Saumya was very different from the Saumya you see today. She was a shy child who had basically shut herself down because from a very early age she had seen abuse and bullying, and the world did not feel like a safe space. Yet there was a part of her through all of that hopelessness that did not lose hope. That felt, okay, there's something that's going to keep me going. I don't know what that is, but I knew that there's something that I'm here for. Yeah. Parallelly, I also felt at that time I could see good in other people. And I could see, okay, why is this person so, feeling so lost or confused about themselves or questioning themselves while they have everything going for them. Right. So I think two very conflicting realities that I was living with at the same time. And I really am grateful for the universe to have guided me here. And I think that is a part that I have gone back to a lot and also healed and also taken inspiration from.
Interesting.
That's been what brought me here.
Right. So almost in terms of what perhaps happened to you when you were growing up is things that you don't want to happen to others. And maybe that's part of why you've taken this path.
So there's
as well.
That quote, right? That where the wound is where the light goes in. I think that is true for me.
Right.
And so the beginning of the journey, honestly, was first to understand my own self and to understand what was I doing wrong that this was happening to me.
Right.
And from there, I think a lot more opened, and I realized that's where my strength also laid, and I could maybe empathize in a way that not many people could.
Got it. Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of the names that you've associated with later on as well. Yeah. So you're done with school, and then you decide to pursue psychology, Delhi University. Yeah. So was that also part of, you think, the plan that you knew that, okay, this is the path that I'm going to be on, and hence, psychology is something that's going to play a vital role?
So, I'm a great believer in the fact that I'm guided. And yet I only do things that I feel passionately about. So when I was in grade 6 is when I fell in love with history. And the reason for that was that the person I was in love with loved history. So I paid extra attention to the subject and I really started to enjoy it. Right. Then I was like, clear, I'm going to study history or at least do humanities. Ours is the first batch that had psychology introduced in school. And there was a lot of fight about introducing it, and we still got through.
Right.
And that's what, so that became my first love. And I started to get the answers I was looking for. And then psychology honors happened in Delhi University. And I think what was beautiful about psychology was that it gave me a lot of information. It gave me a lot of insight. And yet I also became very aware that it's very limited. Ultimately, it's different people's points of views, right? And of course, there's a lot of data to support it, but none of the schools of thoughts were right. And the fight that was happening among psychologists was this is right versus this is right. And in that, what was getting missed on was the human who does not belong to a school of thought, who is beyond schools of thoughts. And that's what convinced me to move away from traditional psychology and find something that works at the core, that is individualized and is not taking years and years to work. Because at the end of 2-3 years of therapy, did the therapy work or did the times change? We just don't know. Or does the person just give up and say, okay, you know what, this is enough. So that's what got me to start looking at other things as well.
So true. And I love the fact how you said that, the reason why you picked history as a subject, and it almost takes me back, to the time when we were in college, and there was, I was in Bhagat Singh doing English honors, and it was supposed to be English honors. First it was supposed to be, I think, history honors. And then Aman was a friend who I started consortium with. So Aman and I, we were walking down the classes, and we walk into our class, and there are only guys sitting there. And Aman said, "Bhai, mere se to nahi hoga." He said, "Let's take a walk around and see what else is available." And we walking past and we see English honors and the only girls. Aman said, "This is the class for me." So then that's how, we chose our subject. So it's interesting in terms of, sometimes how you end up doing certain things. But yeah, just something that came back to me. So you're done with college and you decide to start working with a great Indian company, which is HCL. And today we're, of course, in Sector 6. I think your office probably wouldn't have been very far from here.
Yes,
so not very far from here. HCL is obviously an institution in Noida, as now around the world. What was that like?
Oh, that was amazing. I went as this naive child, okay? And again, I was guided there. So HCL was coming to our campus and everybody was going for their interviews, my friends included. And I, the lost child that I was, did not know about it. And they said, "Oh, the campus talk is happening. Do you want to go?" I said, "Okay, we'll get attendance. The only reason you do anything in college is attendance."
Correct.
And I went for that, didn't have a CV. They said, "Oh, if you don't have a CV, handwrite a CV." So I called my elder brother because he's the only person I knew who might know the full form of CV. I was that checked out.
Wow.
But yes, I think at the end of all of those rounds of interviews and some that happened at the HCL campus as well, I think there were just 2 people who got selected from our college and I was one. So for me, again, that was a sign. And and I said, okay, you know what, while I'm thinking about what I want to do, let's do this. I was so naive that day one, my boss tells me, "Ye data hai, isko Excel mein dal do." And I turned around and said, "Excel kya hota hai?"
No way.
Right? Not kidding. No. At the end of my time there in Excel, I knew my macros, I knew my VLOOKUP, my HLOOKUP. I was training people. So that was a huge win for me. And you're right, it's a company that... one, I think it woke me up. It woke me up to what the world outside is like. The second is I actually started to look at what are my strengths. And from the perspective where I came, it really helped me see that at the end of the day, you could be the head of marketing, you could be the head of HR, you could be anybody, it doesn't matter designation, right? You're first a person. And so what was happening in your life as a human is how it was coming across in your interactions with people. Everything was interlinked to your patterns. So that was a big, big realization for me at that time. And that got me to start looking at things in a very different way. So it wasn't just about people, or rather it wasn't just about roles, it became about people. It became about creating a change at the core, which is at the person level, not at a role level.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think we forget that sometimes, and this is of course like maybe deviating a bit, but as a sales conversation, people sometimes say, "Oh, I'm in the B2B space, I'm in the B2C space, I'm in the B2G space." I'm like, forget all of that. Who is behind all of these, institutions, organizations? It's people, right? And obviously, I mean, Biraj as a friend talks about this a lot. He talks about the H2H, which is the human-to-human aspect of things. And I think people just forget.
Absolutely.
And I think at the end, the core, that's really what it's all about.
Absolutely. We're all in a people-to-people business. You're always selling to a person. Every product, every service is ultimately taken by a person. So if you forget the person, you're actually forgetting the big picture.
Right. And while you're at HCL, because I was seeing when you started Butterfly Effect, you were still at the organization. And you already have, started a little bit of conversations on coaching and the likes. So walk me through that. Like, what was that like, and how did that even happen? How did that even start?
So once again, guidance. So I was going through a little bit of a tough time around 2008, 2009 in my own life. And again, that started sort of bringing up the questions that I had in the childhood. What am I? What is my purpose in life? What am I really doing? Is this my destiny?
Right.
Is this, that's all going to happen in my life?
Right.
And from there, I actually went to a tarot card reader who I had met probably once in college. And she sort of guided me towards a course, which turned out to be clinical hypnotherapy. And that sort of started to bring the picture together. That brought what traditional psychology is. It's clinical psychology,
Right.
but bringing in the element of hypnotherapy. Now, hypnosis or hypnotherapy is not just what we see on stage. It's, when used therapeutically, it actually takes you deep into your subconscious mind. And I started to see changes. And personally for me, like I used to get panic attacks with a very specific trigger, exams. And it started in class 11, went on to college, even went to a psychologist for a year thinking, oh, I'm going to be a psychologist. Why don't I do this as well?
Right.
At the end of 1 year of counseling, I talked a lot about a lot of things in my life, but I had at the end of it a quote that was dance like no one is watching and sing like no one is listening,
Right.
which is a very nice quote, but
Yeah.
it doesn't help when I have a panic attack, right?
Agreed.
Now, when I was learning clinical hypnotherapy, we were doing demonstrations in class and practicing with each other. And we were working at phobias, and I sort of volunteered to be a demo. It was a 30-minute session, and I never got a panic attack again.
Really?
And I was convinced that if this can happen for me, things can happen for others as well.
Right.
And it wasn't that it changed everything in my life. No, I had a lot more stuff to work through.
Right.
But it convinced me that change is possible. It just needed the right direction. So that was my convincing moment.
Right.
And from there, I just went on to learn more and more, and practice more, and
Right.
I think it never stopped after that.
Right. Yeah, and of course, taking a look at some of the names that you worked with. I mean, there's Marshall Goldsmith, there's Louise Hay with Heed Your Life. There's Gallup Strength Coaching, and there's a lot. So you have this big passion towards of course, self improvement and learning, which is key. And we always say keep educating yourself. That's what key really stands for.
Yeah.
But would it really been your drivers to seek out the best of the best? Because I've seen a lot of people when they enter this space, they're like, yaar, kaam chal jayega, kisi se kar lete hain. They'll find a local resource. They'll say, Udemy mein course kar diya, whatever.
Yeah.
They don't really invest in themselves. They don't. You travel extensively abroad, a lot. You've worked with some of these people in person, and we all know what that costs. I mean, if I go to spend some time in Grant Cardone, I mean, it blows a big hole in the wallet. But what made you decide that if I have to take this path, it has to be learning from the best of the best, and there can be no compromise?
I think that is something I've always had. If I'm doing something, I'm going to do it all the way, and I'm going to do the very best that I can. Otherwise, there's no point. It's not to say that I only work with the brands. I'm a keen learner, and I love to keep learning. And more than that, I think I keep applying it to myself. So even 12 years in this line, still to date, I receive sessions and I give sessions to my friends because
Right.
we're humans. We'll keep having our stuff coming up, right? So every 2 weeks, I receive a session and I give one to my friend.
Right.
And that means I, as a channel, am clear when I'm working with somebody else and
Right.
I don't have my projections coming in.
Yeah.
And so this is the commitment I have, one, to my own self. And I think that's a commitment I made to the little girl inside me that, what, you're never going to be alone and we've got this now. And this is also the commitment I make to my clients that if you're here, you're going to get the best. And it's not about which brands. And I'm grateful that I got to work with all of these people.
Right.
At the same time, it's ultimately about, is this giving me something else and something more to bring into what I offer to my clients? If it does, I'm grateful for it. And I'm always going to keep learning.
No, and obviously it's working because, like I said, I hear such good things from whoever spoken to in recent times, and yes, the results are for everyone to see. So really good to see that happening. But let's go back to even the early days of the practice. Okay, you've now moved out of HCL. You're trying to kind of build. Out of your immediate power base, your first set of clients and more. I mean, it couldn't have been easy, right? So what was that like?
I think the first difficult realization after leaving HCL was, there's no salary this month. And it's easy to say, I can make this money very easily. But then when you have to start searching with the clients and clients start asking you, are you really worth this amount?
Right.
I started out by charging 1,500 rupees. And I had people from South Delhi who were asking me, this much? for a 3-hour session.
Yeah.
And I noticed myself trying to justify it, realizing probably the lunch they had was much more than that. Right?
True.
And I realized it was more about building my own worth as a business owner. In fact, even trying to look at myself as a business owner for that matter, and looking at the worth of my own work. So again, as much as it was happening externally, it also became a lot of internal work, and trying to really see, what do I really believe about myself? What are my beliefs around my self-worth? What are my beliefs around what are my possibilities in life? And that was the big one. And it, I think, was leading to a lot of inner work there as well.
Right.
Sure. I mean, friends and extended family and the neighbors. And then I started advertising in a couple of places. So that did get me clients. And then there was no looking back, because then every client has referred at least 10 more.
Wow.
But yes, I think those are humbling days, and I'm grateful for them.
Did you ever question your path at the time and thinking that, okay, have I made the right decision?
I would have questioned it as late as last year as well. So, but I think that question may keep coming up, and every time that question comes up, I think it's just to turn back around and look at the impact that one has been able to have.
Correct.
And more importantly, the growth that I've been able to have.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Even if I don't get paid, and God, I'm not saying that, but I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life, and I might die doing this, and that's what it's about. It's not about the money.
Lovely.
Money is great. It's a byproduct.
Of course.
It's about the impact.
Lovely. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's always about your why and your purpose, and the money is a byproduct. I mean, that's surely just going to follow. Now, we've obviously lived in a difficult period. I mean, these are things that you would see in movies or read in books. And, we've had an event which has happened maybe for the first time ever. I mean, at least they say, okay, go back to the Spanish, pandemic, etc.
Right.
But it's something that no one could have seen coming, right? And the last 2 years, have had their impact on people. Perhaps I would say more negative than positive.
True.
And you're obviously having to have a lot of these conversations. What are some of the things that you're hearing right now? What are some of the people that are coming to you, and what are they saying to you at the moment right now because of the pandemic?
So I think it's changed over the last 2 years. When it started, I was working primarily around the aspect of panic, because people did not know what this is, what to expect, how to deal with it. Suddenly you're at home, and you're hearing all kind of stories, and those stories hadn't really started as much in India by then, but we're hearing about it from Europe and China and all the others.
Right.
So there was a lot of borrowed fear that we were working with. And then when it started to come in India, it almost started with a stigma. Oh, this person has COVID.
Correct.
What was this person doing outside
Correct.
and meeting people and all of that?
Correct.
So for the first, I think 2020, it was primarily panic and symptoms of having to stay at home, and then slowly it started to come into the effects of it. For example, a lot of people who are working from home started to come in with respect to being burnt out, not having any boundaries, or couples started coming in that now we're realizing the challenges we have. It was easy to ignore them when we were both at work. Or, we also had people just because they were staying at home and they were sort of not able to ignore the kind of struggles they were going through.
True.
So physical illnesses started to come up, which had nothing to do with COVID. Yeah. So a lot of that latent stuff was coming up, and that was a lot of work as well. Then say in 2021, a lot of work was again around, of course, when the second wave hit, and it was traumatizing for everybody. Yeah. So then there was again a lot of panic, even when you do not have COVID in your own house, but not being able to help someone. In fact, helplessness was the feeling I think I worked with the most at that time.
Right.
And then a few weeks later, a lot of grief. And I think I'm still working with grief cases till now.
Right.
Because grief is not just about losing a person.
Right.
You lose a person, you go through the rites, etc. But the grief hits after, when everybody's gone. And that's when you have to sort of live with yourself and realize what it has been about. So that was that was a big one as well.
Yeah.
And then again, towards the end of 2021, the world changed in the way that everything opened up. So now people are still trying to manage. Does that mean we're free? Can we go out? Can we do whatever? And then the offices are saying, okay, you know what? Now let's make it worth our while, and so people are working even more.
Correct.
So it's been now in the last few months, I've been working with burnout in a big way, and corporate stress in a big way for that matter. And most of my employees at this point in time are either getting physically ill because of the stress they've had,
right,
or they are just burnt out and are having emotional symptoms around that as well, whether it's in terms of anxiety or whether it's in panic attack or just that helplessness that finally leads to depression. So
Wow. Yeah, you come to think of it. I mean, it's actually been insane. Like we mentioned, initially was the panic, right? Then there was a question about, space. And I remember reading an article in the early days of the pandemic. It was from China, and they were talking about how lawyers have now more business than ever before, especially on the basis of, the divorce cases. I'm laughing, I'm like, all of that and everything else. And then reality hits home. Right, and Mrinalini, in case you're listening, I'm just happy things worked out the way they did. But for a lot of people, it's been tough, and thankfully, we were able to see that path through. But I think in the last couple of years, if I think about it, I have more friends who are now apart than are together, and that's just crazy.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
So unfortunate. And then, of course, you two spoke about. I mean, exactly a year from today, if we go back 1 year. I remember we sat down at home and we were like, working the phones and trying to help people, get oxygen and more. Everyone was home from the office and everyone was like, working helplines, calling people. Everything was just all wrong with that. I mean, I think the worst of, humankind came out where medicines and oxygen and things were just being hoarded, and it surely couldn't have been easy. And I think people who've seen that in their own, lives and families and offices, we had people in the organization, who fell sick and we had to run and get things around for them. It couldn't have been an easy time.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. And to what you said, we saw the worst in humankind. We also saw the best in humankind. And the fact is, the worst and the best always are coexisting.
Right.
And both have the opportunity to come up. Yeah. It's just about the context. And it's also always about the opportunity in that context.
So true.
And so in the last year, yes, I did see a lot of pain in humankind. But we also saw a lot of good. We saw people forgetting themselves and helping others, right? And staying up and, forming groups and making sure that the ambulances are taken care of and the oxygen supply is made available and doing it for free and all the others. I mean, so many doctors just gave their services for free. And so there's no end to that. And sometimes I think even at that time, for me personally, it was important to shift that focus to what is here. And I think that helped. And it wasn't easy, yes.
Right.
I have worked with companies where where they lost the leader they looked up to the most, and I've ran grief sessions for them.
Right.
And then leadership sessions for the future leaders because they did not know how to take this forward. Right. So humanity is complicated, and they are all interlinked.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, like, how does one really overcome that? Where you've lost, the sole bread earner, or the primary bread earner of a family, or like the name behind an organization. I mean, losing these people are life-changing events. I mean, it's now a matter of life and death. So how do you even have that or start that conversation? I'm just curious.
I think by not ignoring it, by acknowledging it for what it is and acknowledging the person for who he or she was. And it's not about trying to put it away, because the grief heals, but that space that's been made with the person's absence will never really go away. It's just that you keep moving forward, and so that hole would sort of become more distant.
Right.
And you'll fill your life with other things as well, not to fill that hole, because that's never going to go.
Right.
And recognizing that this is a loss, talking about it as a loss, and then talking about the person and what that person brought in.
Right.
Of course, there are practicalities to it. Like you said, if somebody's a sole bread earner, right, that's not the easiest of things. And then it's not just about emotions, it's also about practicality. And what do you do then? And those are very difficult conversations to have.
Yeah. And people respond in different ways, right? When they're put in a situation like this, there's some people who have emotional outbursts which they're unable to, even overcome, and just keeps, recurring. There are some who are really good with suppressing, right? And they'll be like, oh, I'm fine. This is just absolutely okay. And that can't be a good thing, right? I mean, it's going to, at some point, just explode like a volcano would, right?
Yeah. It would either explode like a volcano emotionally or physically. See, the fact is, all our emotions that we keep buried in, and it's not just emotions that we think are volatile, but anything that is unresolved, that is unexpressed and unresolved, keeps holding a place in your physical body as well. And ultimately, that is the place that causes physical illnesses to come in.
Right.
So 2 years later, like I said, last year, we started seeing manifestations of in terms of physical manifestation. We're still seeing it. And now it's more critical illnesses. And grief that goes unacknowledged, unresolved, for example, is now
Right.
coming in the form of cancer. It's coming in the form of heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so see, sometimes we get overwhelmed by emotions.
Right.
But the fact is, it's our emotions that make us human. And there's no running away from them.
Mm.
If we get attached to the story of it, that's what's going to keep it coming and coming and coming. But the fact is, an emotion is like a cloud in the sky. It can come and it can go, and sometimes it would rain. And it's okay. And then the sun is there, the sky is still there. That's it.
Yeah, I love that. I think you really put that really well, and kind of makes one think that perhaps you don't have to be like Mr. Spock from Star Trek, saying that
Definitely
I
not.
don't feel.
And
it's not
Mr.
a good
Spock
thing.
also had a human side to him. So.
Apparently, yeah. So when we talk about the context of mental health and well-being, there's a big difference between how India is perceived and how mental health is perceived globally. And I have friends. You've happened to meet, Dr. Randazzo from Texas, for example. Very big difference in terms of, how problems like that are perceived, here, vis-a-vis, they are in the West. I mean, here almost like, when someone does want to come forth with that, there are almost families that are suppressing and saying, "Chhod do, theek ho jayega, apne aap ho jayega, tension ho raha hai, aisa, waisa." So, what are some of the biases that you're seeing towards, mental health, on the whole?
Okay, so things are changing in India as well, and things are not perfect elsewhere either. But yes, it's a process, and the process is really driven by our own vulnerability, right? So in our childhood or all through our growing up years, we've been taught to be strong, right?
Yeah.
You're a strong girl, you're a strong boy. And then there are those biases of what a gender means. So if you're a boy, you can't express emotions in a certain way. If you're a girl, you're supposed to express them only in this way. Or this is okay, this is not. So the biases are actually very subtle as well.
Right.
The second part of it is, what does it mean for me? So does that mean I could not take care, or I could not be strong enough, I could not control? If I'm going to a doctor, or if I'm going to a therapist to get help, does that mean I'm not good enough, I'm not man enough, I'm not woman enough, I'm not big enough, whatever that enough is, right? The third is, we think, if you need help, pagal hai, right? But you don't have to wait for a diagnosis to get help. In fact, the help should happen before you get a diagnosis. Let's look at it as a parallel, okay? There's no judgment when you go to a doctor or a physician when you have fever. Why should there be a judgment when you go to a therapist because you have emotions?
So true.
Right? And you're going to a doctor for fever because, beyond a point that crocin is not helping. The same thing is here. Maybe the food that you've been eating to suppress it is not helped anymore.
Right.
Or the alcohol that you had. Or whatever, even the healthier ways you were doing, maybe meditation, maybe forgiveness, whatever. That's not working anymore. That simply means there's something that's beyond my capacity or vision that I'm not able to handle it.
Correct.
That's all that it is. The second part of it is, if, say, for example, I got my blood test done and my cholesterol was a little on the higher side.
Right.
Would I wait for it to actually become a full-fledged problem before I get help? Or would I start being careful and aware now?
Correct.
Right? It's the same for emotional mental well-being.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait for you to have a full breakdown before you go for help.
Correct.
In fact, that's when it takes us longer. This is dealable and very fast as well. So not to say that's not, it is.
Right.
But, it's the same thing. The kind of medicines I'll have to give there versus here. And the same way, the amount or the kind of therapy I'll do there, because it would have had so many layers to it,
Correct.
versus what I do now, is very different.
So true. So point being that start early. If you see the signs and you think you're not being able to get a grip, see a therapist, see a counselor, see someone who can help.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
And talk about it even in terms of the fact that it's okay. Sometimes when I talk to my clients and I say, I used to go to a therapist myself. I think it puts them to ease. They realize that I'm not perfect and I don't want to be. I'm a human, right?
Yep.
And that's something we can do with everybody. I have taken help. You can too,
Correct.
right? And the other is, when someone is starting to think about it, encourage them, support them in whatever way. See, one major challenge we have in India as compared to other countries is, in the West, the insurance companies pay for your sessions, at least a few sessions.
Correct.
Here it becomes about an additional expenditure,
Right.
And that is also that holds people back.
True that.
But again, if you're starting out at an early level, you don't need to get that, that many number of sessions or, make that sort of an investment.
Right.
it begins with self. It begins with prioritizing yourself. And the fact is, everything else that we've prioritized, whether it's our work, whether it is, the parties or anything else,
Right.
that's going to fade away if you don't have your own self in it.
True.
And that's the biggest loss you can have.
So true. Did you ever have people who kind of, questioned the fact that you yourself were so young when you were doing some of these sessions, and then and normally the perception is someone older,
True.
got like 3 decades of experience behind them, and here you're not even like turned 30 when you were already having these difficult conversations. So did people ever question from that perspective?
A lot of it. See, when I started out, I was 23, 24 years old. And so what does a 23-year-old know about, say, marriage? What do you know about life? Or the kind of questions I did get. Right. And I used to turn around and say, I don't need to experience a heart attack to be a heart surgeon, right?
So true.
So I need to understand human beings. I need to understand how the human beings work, how you think, and where your blocks are, and know how to help you resolve those.
Right.
And not necessarily experience that same pain myself, because then there's no end to it. And I think now, 12 years down, a few gray hair have helped, and I've told my body that's enough. That's more than enough.
Like you don't have to be a heart surgeon to know how a heart attack played out. Yeah, I agree on that one. And what about in the last few years? You've also seen this explosion of speakers, trainers, coaches, people who had different businesses, unrelated, no purpose, and just popped in because they saw an opportunity. Does that sometimes bother you when you just see people, who come in and claim to be like experts in a particular domain, or just tend to market themselves better, and that they probably will not be able to deliver the right, like experience / treatment results? Does that bother you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I bet I have taken a couple of sessions on the bothering that it did for me. But, see, I think it's going to be for every profession, right? There's always going to be somebody who's going to stand up and say, I'm the expert. Yeah. Yes, unfortunately, in the coaching and therapy industry, everybody today can call themselves a coach. Unfortunately, in India, we don't look at certifications and accreditations beyond a point. Right. We look at what's popular. And then I do feel the work speaks for themselves. And you could be going to whoever you need to go to, and I really do believe that we all have a need that we need to be fulfilling for ourselves, right? And accordingly, we also attract the help that we need. If we are, there are millions of doctors in the country, right? Thousands at least. Yeah. And if that is the case, not every doctor is the answer to everybody's problem, even if they are from the same specialization.
True.
So I let my work speak for myself, and I feel that more than the marketing, and I'll be honest, that's the area I need to improve on. Right. I don't market myself at all. Right. But more than the marketing, my true marketing is done by my clients. Yeah. And when somebody, again, goes up to their friend and say, you know what, talk to her, I have been helped. Right. Then I don't need to do any convincing. True. Then when they come in, they're already converted. Yeah. And then they'll just say, this is my problem, help me. And we get the work started. I think it saves me a lot of time and a lot of headache.
Of course. Yeah. I think there is no way to beat, word of mouth. I remember even when Consortium started out, I don't think that at least for the first 12 to 13 years, we did any marketing. It was just word of mouth. Somebody would leave some company, Maruti guy would leave, join Airtel, we went to Airtel, Airtel guy would leave, join ESPN, went to ESPN. It was just by word of mouth and then referrals and everything else. Yeah. And I think truly that's, the best way to, grow in the space as well. Let's talk about organizations, that have, people who need assistance in this space. Are you seeing more and more organizations that are now stepping up and saying, please be a caregiver / a helper to people in my teams? Or is that right now not really happening in, too big a way?
Well, it's not happening the way I would like it to happen, to be honest. During COVID times, especially last year, we had a lot of organizations who started to have talks around this and who said, okay, you know what, well-being is very important for us. Let's do some initiatives. Right. Unfortunately, in India, it was a fad more than something that was sustained. Right. And the moment it came to work versus mental health, and unfortunately, it became that, right? It's one versus another. Not realizing without this, the other is not going to be very sustainable. Right. In fact, the cost of that is a lot more. True. So there are some organizations that are doing really good work in it,
Right.
and they have, they have year-long sort of programs. They are also looking at where the challenges are.
Right.
The other sort of work that organizations that are doing is, come talk about it, and let's talk about it. And well, that's good. Okay, it's great to have a conversation. It's great to start building awareness.
Yeah.
But then what? And that is the thing. Now, I don't have a big organization. I have 3 people working with me. We potentially can't support an organization as a call center to call in for help.
True.
However, what we were and what we are still doing with some organizations is we're driving their well-being initiatives. So we're helping them identify where are the gaps.
Got it.
What kind of challenges do people have? Are they all emotional challenges, or are there other kind of challenges as well?
Yep.
And then customize the solutions they need.
Right.
I only support an emotional mental well-being and, as an effect, also leadership effectiveness, because they are interlinked.
Right.
But beyond that, if physical well-being is required, I have people I collaborate with, or for example, if social well-being is required, that requires more CSR sort of work, or something that we can do as an organization.
Correct.
Then again, it's either something we help the organization come up with and help them design it,
Right.
or we have other people that they can collaborate with. But the fact is, it has to be a long-term thing. It's just that I can't eat a healthy meal right now and then gorge on anything that I want for the rest of my, the rest of the week. It's not going to work.
Yeah, I agree, and I totally wish that would become more than just like a PR exercise, or just checking off the boxes where HR says, hey, we did this and now we're all set. I think it just requires longer engagement.
Absolutely.
And I think this happens in a lot of areas, like sustainability is another one, and mental wellness, I think, is perhaps, the space that you just mentioned as well. Tell me about, coping with addiction, because I'm sure there are, a lot of people who've been also coming in, having a difficult conversation around, being addicted to, alcohol or tobacco. I mean, there could be X number of addictions, right?
These days.
Social media.
Yeah.
Okay, Mrinalini, don't watch this. Phones,
Yeah.
right? So and so how are you, really helping, people in this space? And are you seeing an explosion of this? And B, what role are you really playing in with, patients with this stuff as well?
See, okay, all of these are symptoms of another thing, right? So everything that we see on the surface that we call a problem is actually not the problem. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. So when I'm addicted to something, I only get addicted because it's giving me something in return, right? So I get a happy feeling, I get a kick, I get a hormonal dopamine kick at the end of it, right? So when that is happening, I would want to keep doing it. Now, that is how the brain works. Then what is it taking me away from is the bigger question. So if, say, for example, I'm working with addiction, I would want to look at, I'll give you a real life example.
Sure.
There's somebody I was working with. He was the India head of a real estate company, foreigner. Okay, so the land that this person comes from is where you have beer for breakfast. Okay, and this person came to me for alcohol addiction. He said, I've tried everything. I've tried the medicines. I've gone to the rehabs. They don't work. And something needs to happen. I need help, because when I go and meet the who's who, I can't be less than myself. And unfortunately, every time I do it, now I feel guilty and I feel worse about myself. And it just goes around in a cycle. And so what we did with him was I actually helped him to go through that entire process of when is that exact moment when that desire comes up, and what is that moment where the helplessness comes in against the desire and you sort of give in, right? And we went through a couple of scenarios, and we realized there was a very particular trigger. The trigger was when he was feeling alone, when he felt he didn't know enough, and he felt that, okay, you know what, I don't know my next steps. So the feeling that came in for him was that of helplessness, unworthiness. So that is what he was running away from. Now, every time I drink alcohol, it actually just numbs out a part of my brain, right? So I don't have to think about it. That's the gift it gives me. I don't have to think about what I don't like. The moment I recognize that trigger, I can actually cut that, right? And then the change work is. So it's not just about removing something, but it's actually also about building your resources in the present.
Right.
Now, in this particular case, it only took 2 sessions. Not every case is just 2 sessions. But in 2 sessions, he stopped drinking after that.
Wow.
He, in fact, went back to the land he came from. And he went through some difficult times in his life and also COVID, but has not had a drink.
Wow.
So it's about really reaching the core. Now, I'm getting a lot of people these days around social media addiction. Not everybody thinks it's a problem, but they realize when they're working maybe till 2 or 3 in the morning and then not sleeping and then, sort of going around it. So often the addiction is realized when you realize other problems, right? So, my BP is really shot up, or I'm having some heart issues, or, I'm having palpitations and anxiety. Now, that's what they'll come up for. And then we realize one of the symptoms of that also is the addiction to social media or something else, or a substance, etc.
Yep.
Again, what is that giving you here? So for an addiction, I would always say, if this was not there, what would you lose out on? And what does it give you? And I would actually go back to the very first time I started with it. Like, for most people, if you're working with smoking, right? Smoking is a very social exercise. In a corporate, most people start smoking because the boss goes out and smokes.
Correct.
And the ones who actually go out and have that discussion over that smoke is
Correct.
where the deal is closed.
Yep.
They're the ones who are the closest.
Yep.
So while,
Yep.
okay, you know what, I want to be part of that gang. So either I'm going to be passively smoking, or I might as well start smoking.
True.
And so it begins. So what did it give them? Oh, it gave me a sense of importance. It gave me a sense of belonging. I felt like I was one of the group. Those are the gaps I would want to work with.
Right.
That's where.
Interesting. Yeah. And again, you're saying, when is a good time to come out and get help when it comes to addictions? As soon as you spot
As soon
the
as you
signs?
think, yeah. As soon as you spot it. As soon as, yeah.
Got it.
See, for anything, it's the moment you spot it. For mental health, we always say that when something starts to interfere with your life, as humans, we're also very adaptive. So it takes us a long time to realize, oh, it's trying to interfere with my life,
Right.
especially when it comes to addictions.
Yeah.
But yeah, the moment you spot it, the moment you realize that when I am not having this, I'm not feeling good. That's the time to realize, oh, I'm dependent here.
Awesome.
And so from dependency to addiction is also a journey. So that's the time before it becomes an addiction.
Got that. No, this has been super, and we still have a few more questions to go. But just wondering, how can people reach out to you? Because a lot of our listeners would, connect with some of the things that you said, and they want, ways to get in touch with you. So, of course, while I'll put in some of your social handles and your email ID in the, comments of the YouTube video and the podcast as well. But what are the best ways to reach out to you?
Drop me an email or send me a message. That's the easiest one. Calling me sometimes is difficult because I'm usually in a session and I will not take the call,
Right.
but I will call back. So it's better that somebody just drops a message and gives me a reference, and I'll get back to them.
Cool. So yeah, I'm going to put your coordinates on the comments and all of that as well. So definitely, because like I said, you're making such a tremendous impact, and I think the world really needs to know more about the work that you're doing and more. What really is in store for you in the years ahead? I know it's been early in the journey still, and you still have like a long way to go. But what's really lined up next? What's on the cards in the months and years to come?
Oh, well, I think to put it simply, it would be following the signs that that the universe shows me. But honestly, I think it's about normalizing emotional mental well-being and normalizing its linkage also, because otherwise a big part of my work also is in leadership effectiveness, right? And I have in my work linked the two together.
Important.
So when I'm working with corporates, I won't normally talk about mental health the same way.
Right.
So I would not necessarily take them back to their childhood, but I'll do it in a way that's safe for them. And I'll also help them see patterns that they can either use to become better leaders,
Right.
or or overcome to become better leaders and be more effective in their lives. So now, one is to in terms of things that are coming up, one is to keep on that work in the space of normalizing mental emotional well-being.
Right.
The second is normalizing mental health in corporates, and that's a big one for me, because I feel that's an environment where people feel both excited and helpless, and it's a vicious cycle. And that is where, if they could build in and they could learn the resources that could take care of themselves, they don't always need to come to a therapist. It's as simple as, if I know how to eat my fruits and eat my salads, I don't always need to go to a nutritionist and when I've gained 100 kgs, right? So that's the one. And the third is to bring it into schools. So we've done some work there already, and we have collaborated with a couple of organizations.
Right.
And here the idea is not to work with children. Because see, children are helpless in the sense that they are helpless in the context. The ones who are the decision makers are the parents and the teachers. They are the biggest influencers.
Right.
In fact, in my career earlier, I used to work with children. Now I've stopped doing that because you could help that child have the hugest change, and then the child goes back into an environment that does not support that change, right? And it is further traumatizing for the child.
Correct.
And honestly speaking, it was difficult for me as well.
Yeah.
So I started to work with the ones who are the influencers, the teachers, the parents.
Good
And
idea.
that's the work I'm also continuing on with schools.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think that's going to really have some great impact, no doubt. So this is, of course, the Smashed Bashed, Yet Not Dashed podcast. And my concluding question to you would be this. So people who, in this time, are feeling, smashed and bashed and feeling quite hopeless, what would really be your parting advice to them?
Well, there was a story that a parable that Osho really talked about, which was that there was once a king who asked the wise men to give him a ring that had the wisest words written, and so somebody gave him that ring, and they said, "Read it when you are in trouble, and read it in the highest times as well." And the words were, "This too shall pass." And I think that's the one that to remember, one step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one breath at a time. And the idea is to keep moving.
Yeah.
And if you keep moving, the worst of the worst will pass. And it's okay to ask for help.
Love that. Thank you, Saumya. It was an absolute pleasure to
Thank
have
you.
you
Thank
at
you.
the Academy today and have you on the Smash Bashed, Yet Not Dashed podcast. Viewers, I'm sure you love that one, and listeners as well. Saumya Sharma, ladies and gentlemen, do follow her. I will put all her coordinates and social handles in our chat box and the comments, etc. as well. Definitely reach out to her if you ever need absolutely anything in this space to have a conversation and more. We are both BNI chapter members. Feel free to come to our BNI chapter. Excellence is a great chapter, and I'm the president and she's the vice president, just in case you didn't know that. But really enjoyed this conversation and wishing you all the best and more.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.